Tonight, I just want to talk honestly about denial a little bit. Not in some super cynical way, not a heavy handed way, just real life, because denial is one of those things that pretty much all of us has to deal with, whether we realize it or not. Denial is that thing in us that says, I'm good when we're not, says it's fine when it's not. It's not a big deal when it kind of is. Sometimes denial is obvious, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it looks like we're ignoring sin. Sometimes it looks like we're excusing bad habits. Sometimes it looks like we're avoiding grief or pain or anger or fear because dealing with it feels so overwhelming. Sometimes it just looks like we're pretending that we're spiritually okay because we know the right things to say. And I think one of the reasons denial is so common is because honestly, it feels safer. It feels safer to avoid the truth than to face it. It feels safer to keep moving than to slow down and admit that something's wrong. It feels safer to manage appearances than to let people or even God get close to what's really happening in us. But the Bible keeps showing us that hiding has never really been the answer. I mean, all the way back to Genesis. After Adam and Eve sinned, they hid. They covered themselves up. They tried to get away from God. And that's such a human response, right? Like we do the same things. When something in us feels exposed, our instinct is usually not to run toward God, it's to back away, to hide, to act like everything's okay. But God comes looking for them. And that matters a lot to me because God doesn't just leave them in the bushes. He goes after them, He calls to them, and He still does that with us. That's one of the clearest things that we see in Scripture. God's always pulling people out of hiding and into the truth, not because He wants to shame us, but because He loves us too much to let us stay trapped in the dark. That's really the problem with denial. It keeps us in the dark. And we serve a God who is light, which means if we want real closeness with Him, eventually we have to stop pretending. We have to stop managing the image. We have to stop acting like saying the right things is the same thing as being healthy. Because denial can get really polished. I mean, it can look religious, it can look respectable, it can look like somebody who's still serving, still smiling, still showing up, just never actually letting God touch the deeper stuff. We can deny anger by calling it stress. We can deny pride by calling it a strong conviction. We can deny fear by calling it wisdom. We can deny control by calling it responsibility. We can deny hurt by calling it toughness. We get really good at renaming things so we don't have to face them. But God isn't interested in our labels as much as He is interested in the truth. And that can sound scary at first, but it's actually mercy. Because you can't heal what you keep hiding. You can't bring something before God if you keep insisting it's not there. You can't deal with a wound by pretending it's not bleeding. A lot of the time, denial feels like protection when it's actually a prison. It keeps us stuck, it drains us, it forces us to spend all this energy maintaining a version of ourselves that just isn't fully honest. Maybe that's part of why some people feel so tired all the time. Not just because life is hard, I mean, it is, but because pretending is exhausting. Like carrying around unspoken stuff is exhausting. Keeping things buried takes so much energy. And denial doesn't just mess with our relationship with God, it affects our relationships with everybody. Because once we get used to hiding, we usually start doing it everywhere. We become guarded. We stop being honest. We keep people at a distance. We only share the cleaned up versions of ourselves. The problem is that real conviction can't grow where truth is missing. And that goes for friendships, that goes for marriage, that goes for family, church, small groups, any relationship. If we're committed to pretending, then people can be around us without ever really knowing us. I think that's part of why truth matters so much in the Christian life. Jesus said, the truth sets us free, not the edited version of the truth, not the convenient truth, the truth. And that doesn't mean the truth always feels good. Oftentimes, truth hurts. Sometimes truth is uncomfortable because it forces us to admit that the thing we've been blaming on everybody else is also living in us. Sometimes it makes us face patterns we've been excusing for years. Sometimes it brings pain to the surface that we were hoping would just stay buried forever. But even then, truth is still a gift. Because God doesn't bring things into the light to crush us. He brings them into the light so he can heal them. That's the difference between condemnation and conviction. Condemnation says, hide, run, cover it up. If people see the real you, it's over. Conviction says, bring it into the light. Be honest. God can work with honesty. Condemnation pushes us deeper into denial. Conviction invites us into grace. That's why confession matters so much. Confession is basically the opposite of denial. Denial says, it's not really there. But confession says, it's there. Yes. Denial says, I can handle this. Confession says, I need God. I can't handle this on my own. Denial says, keep this hidden at all costs. Confession says, Lord, I am laying this down at your feet. And the amazing thing is that when people come to God honestly in Scripture, he doesn't turn them away. He meets them with mercy. So maybe the big question for all of us in this is just, what am I still hiding? What am I minimizing? What am I excusing? What pain am I pretending I'm over? What sin have I dressed up in better language? What fear keeps me from being honest with God or with other people? Those questions, boy, uncomfortable. But they're good questions because freedom usually starts there. It starts when we stop pretending. Not when we become impressive, not when we have everything cleaned up, not when we finally look like we got it all together. Freedom starts when we get honest. And the good news of the gospel is that Jesus is not waiting for us to get polished before we come to him. He invites us to come as we are, truth and all. He already knows. The hiding is for us, not for him. So, if there's some area of your life where denial has settled in, the invitation isn't to try harder to cover it. The invitation is to bring it into the light. Bring God the mess. Bring him the fear, the anger, the shame. Bring him the thing you've been avoiding. The truth you don't even fully want to say out loud yet. Because what stays buried tends to keep its power. But what gets brought into the light, well, that's where healing can begin. And that's really the hope here. You don't have to live behind a mask. You don't have to keep performing. You don't have to stay trapped in hiding. God calls us into the light. And when we come into that light, we don't find rejection. We find mercy. We find grace. We find a God who already knows and still loves us enough to lead us into something better. We're currently living in a society where Christians feel like they're on the offensive all the time. And maybe they are. But one thing I'm not seeing a lot of lately is those same Christians going through the fundamentals. A lot of us join the team and then quit practicing. A lot of us have been in this mode for years, but we haven't worked to grow. I'm going to do a few of these, and they're really just challenges over very simple stuff. Stuff that I still have to work on every day. What are you in denial about? What can you confess? Confess to God. Confess it to someone that you know and trust. Start getting better today and stop living in the darkness.